Welcome to another episode of PATHOS. My name is Colbert B. Williams Sr. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified anger management facilitator. Today we'll be continuing our discussion on fears. So let's first start off with reminding all of you of our PATHOS/life mantra. And that mantra is insight, awareness, and exercising appropriate judgment, meaning making appropriate choices and decisions. So again, just kind of a little foundation and background on fear and what fear is. Fear is a distress emotion aroused by impending signals, which are many times identified as dangers, whether the threat is real or imagined, commonly referred to as gut feelings, and this I define as our intuitions, and these feelings are conditions of being afraid. So the contradictions of our discussion will be dynamics, dilemmas of fear in regards to the human condition. So let's continue on. Fear of love. Many times this is fear of trust. And in our previous discussions of interpersonal relationships, this particular dynamic is very pervasive. Fear of love, it's fear of betrayal, fear of love, fear of rejection, and many times, again, remind yourselves that these dynamics are overlapping and integrated, so they kind of mesh with one another. Fear of love, fear of acceptance, fear of love, fear of violation, fear of love, fear of relationships. And let me remind all of you that each one of these dynamics can be a week discussion, 2-week discussion, could be a retreat on all these particular topics. Fear of love, fear of hurt/grief, fear of love, fear of loss. And just reflect back on your own interpersonal relationships in your particular life journeys. These dynamics are very, very pervasive when we're talking about contradictions, the dilemmas of the human condition. Let's move on. Fear of love, fear of risk. And many times people in interpersonal relationships are afraid of taking that risk out of the things that we've mentioned before, the fear of betrayal, fear of rejection. So these are incredibly interchangeable dynamics that sometimes are very spontaneous in the course of exploring one's feelings and exploring one's journey in life. Fear of love, fear of change. Now, this is a really pervasive dynamic that when people fall in love, the fear is, will that love be the same in the beginning as it will be 2 years, 5 years, 20 years? And a good example, if you like to people watch, you ever observe people in vehicles and you kind of see them sitting beside each other, right? If you got a bench seat, they're all up underneath one another. And that must be a new relationship. Now, observe people maybe 2 years down the line, if it was the same couple, they are no longer usually sitting next to each other, they're on opposite sides of the truck. So what happened to that relationship, or what happened to that love? What happened to that intimacy? What happened to that affection? Fear of change. So when we're exploring change, this is a very, very powerful fear that, if my love changes, what do I do with that? Where do I go with that? And here comes the next fear of fear of love is fear of guilt. The guilt feelings that we experience when change happens. Now, change is one of the facts of life many people have difficulty embracing. They sometimes, depending on your background, your values, your beliefs, that guilt feeling of change. Well, I no longer love you the way I did in the beginning of this relationship. Now, we can talk about this probably in another retreat about, are people bound in relationships when change happens? Again, here comes that guilt feeling. So let's move on to fear of commitment. Now, when you're talking about relationships and love and many things, you hear this word commitment. Fear of commitment, fear of risk. Well, that risk of, if I make a commitment, what happens with that? And with anything in life, everything has risk. Fear of commitment, fear of obligation. Many times people get really get-ridden and really stress-ridden when Well, fear of that commitment is that I'm obligated to you because of many things that have happened in our lives, back to those values and beliefs and social norms, that when you make a commitment, there's this obligation. And going back to some of those dynamics of change, when change happens and I'm struggling with my obligations, with my commitments, with this guilt that, well, I'm no longer feeling the same way I felt earlier. So again, these are very, very powerful dynamics. Fear of commitment, fear of responsibility. Wow, this is kind of a wow moment. Now, what am I responsible for in this commitment? Am I responsible for your happiness? Am I responsible for your security for the rest of your life? That fear of responsibility is incredibly pervasive, and sometimes in relationships, this is another dynamic that people really struggle with, is that, being responsible for others. Fear of commitment. This is another dynamic that contradicts itself. If people have fear of commitment, there's sometimes fear of love itself. That many times with that love, oh, I need a commitment. And many times that fear of commitment is the fear of actually what is love. And people, this can be another topic in and of itself on an episode of just talking about what love is. Fear of commitment, fear of betrayal. And many times if you've been in relationships and people make a commitment to you and then this commitment is not honored or this commitment gets betrayed, and this goes back to some of those earlier dynamics we were talking about, that fear of grief, fear of being hurt. So many times an individual or individuals have fears of even wanting to get into a relationship because there's this situation that I really don't want to experience that pain, that loss, that goes with love. So I have this in-depth fear of being betrayed. And this last fear of commitment would be fear of violation. Now, betrayal and violation, sometimes they go hand in hand. So these are one of many dynamics that we talk about in that journey of fear. So as we wrap up today's session, I would like to wish all of you peace, unconditional love, and happiness.
If you are experiencing issues with today's topic and need professional guidance, contact us at 866-726-7881 or through our website, www.enlcinc.com.